Hello, welcome to Live from America podcast. This is Hatem, and you know, my guest today, somebody I've been watching. I watched him the first time by coincidence on YouTube. His show is The Rabbi and and I was like, okay, here we go again. There's a lot of shows like this, and then I watch it, and it's just like I kept watching and watching. It's very entertaining, and it comes from a place I believe. From a good person. But it's also entertaining and have a lot of information, and he's here today. If you don't watch The Rabbi and you should. It's a podcast. Also, it's on YouTube, but you can listen to it as a podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And also on Wednesday night at 8 p.m., right? Is it 8 p.m. or a.m.?
8 p.m. No, 8 in the evening, live on TikTok.
He's live in TikTok. Look at that. And if you want to be Jewish, I don't recommend it, but it's fine. You can be. His book is How to Be Jewish in 30 Seconds, and it's in Amazon and whatever you get your books. Rabbi, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I just want to let you know that last night on my TikTok, I made 8 cents.
Oh, wow. Look at you.
And the month before, I made $1.80 for the month.
Oh, that's amazing. So
Yes, it is.
I was asking you before this is like because we talked a little bit and it's like you're funny, Do you and you we were talking about humor, and I think it's important to be funny in a lot of things, but you touched on a very good point about how you start to recognize that funny is important.
Well, I spent 40 years in a psychiatric hospital, and you're not going to last in psychiatry without having a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
And the other thing you learn is humor breaks down all kinds of resistance. It crosses cultural lines. And listen, God created human beings because he needed a good laugh.
There you go. So you spent 40 years there. What was your primary job?
My first 20 years were
Yeah.
in neuropsychiatry. So I was visiting Alzheimer's and stroke patients. Then our chaplain covering addiction retired, and nobody was terribly interested. I took training. So my last 20 years were in addictions. I was an addictions therapist,
That's
addiction chaplain.
Yeah, that's a pretty tough job. I mean, it takes a lot of tools on you as because I feel a lot of times like the people that support people that have obviously the person that going through something suffers a lot, but so does the people around him and the people taking care of him.
It's as with a lot of illnesses, it's a group. Sometimes we lose sight of the fact and focus on the patient without realizing that it's father, mother, sister, brother, aunt, uncle, cousin, partner, and sometimes colleagues at work as well. So you're absolutely right. It involves a group.
Yeah.
The joke about it takes a village, but
Yeah.
putting the joke aside, it affects everybody.
It's interesting. I was going through some medical issues, and there was always a therapy for, the person who's sick. But what I liked about the hospital that I was at Northwell in Long Island, that they also had a therapy for the caregivers, which I think it's crucial. But again, humor, I think, got me through a lot of things, especially when I was sick. And what about let's talk about your rabbi background a little bit.
I was ordained at the Hebrew Union College, Cincinnati, Ohio. But prior to that, I'm a graduate of Boston College,
Okay.
class of 68. And I owe a lot to my Jesuit Catholic training background when I attended Boston College. So much so that on the podcast and YouTube channel, there's an episode called The Jesuit Rabbi.
Mm.
And that's my autobiography. It's why I became a rabbi and how the process happened and everything about it. Uh, I used to joke with people. I do interfaith weddings and I've done gay, lesbian. I do the whole plethora. And my website is rabbionthego.com. So if
Nice.
you're interested in my officiating, I used to joke with people that I'm a Jesuit rabbi, to get converts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, after one wedding, my wife pulled me aside and she said, people think you're serious. And I started listening. Some people actually thought I was a rabbi and a Jesuit priest. So
Oh,
I stopped using the joke.
I'm still here.
that I stopped using the joke that I'm a Jesuit rabbi and I'm a little more careful, and I started listening. And I realized that at the cocktail hour, the reception, people would come up to me, would start talking, and out of the blue, someone would say, "Where'd you get your Catholic education or Jesuit education? What Jesuit school did you go to?" And as I kept feeling that out, I realized that the training from Boston College was the same that I got when I went to seminary. It was critical thinking,
Mm,
how to analyze, and not taking basic assumptions for granted. You know, Aristotle said if your initial assumption is false, then no matter how good your arguments are, they're all false.
mm,
And so that was part of the training was take a look at where you're starting from. And how did you get there?
yeah.
And then once I started seminary, I realized that it was, I had already been trained in the thinking. Now I just had to do the material. So I want everyone to realize I was born Jewish. I didn't convert. I'm not a Jesuit priest. But if you listen to the Jesuit rabbi, you'll hear my story.
That's awesome. As you know, we live in a world now, this is very, obviously a very nice person and we're having fun with this, but we're gonna tackle some really tough topics because we live in a crazy times and crazy world. But before that, you know, as a, a religious person, as a person that represent a religion, I feel like th these days that we live in, most people look at I'm religion. I follow my religion and I practice and I feel like if you don't, you shouldn't call yourself something. But you feel like a lot of people will be like looking at you differently if you just say I'm religious or you say and even just saying they say the word religious I don't even know what it because it could mean a lot of things. I mean you just follow you're not crazy, you're not extreme. I mean there's obviously some extremists, but I
Right.
don't call these people religious at all. I think they're crazy. But we live in a world where you have, if you're a rabbi, if you're a priest, if you're an imam, if you're anything, or even follow, people look at you differently. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, having spent 40 years in with the VA as a hospital chaplain, I was also chaplain with the Bel Air Volunteer Fire Company for 100 years. I'm now a lifetime member. I worked with the American Cancer Society. I was co-facilitator of a cancer support group, but all those roles were as a chaplain. Now, I've had a couple of part-time congregations, 100 families or less. So I've never identified or thought of myself as a congregational rabbi.
Mm,
I'm much more chaplain. And I've found that I'll introduce myself differently depending on the setting. You're absolutely right. If I wanted to kill a party, I would walk in and say, "I'm Rabbi Block. What's your name?" And that ended the party.
yeah.
I found that if I introduced myself as Chaplain Block, there was a good chance half the group there were former military,
Mm,
and they all knew their chaplain. And that set a very different tone. And so I found myself using the title chaplain more often than rabbi. However, my patients, many of them preferred to call me rabbi, and I would say to them, "Well, all of us use the title chaplain. It's an equal title." And they said, "Oh no, you're a rabbi, and a rabbi is special and different." And this came from my Christian patients.
mm,
And in, they elevated me with that title because how they viewed it, because the chaplain was the chaplain and they were used to them in the military.
mm.
But to actually meet a rabbi, it some spiritual level. So to answer your question, I use different, and often I would just say I work for the government, though I
Mm.
don't say that anymore. It's not, I don't want, I would not say that out
Kind of
anymore.
cool.
I used to say that.
Yeah.
Again, you're absolutely right. And the same thing with religion. You tell someone what your religion is, and what they think of are the extremes. If you say you're Muslim, right away they go to the far out extreme group that they saw in the news. And if you say you're any kind of a Christian, they think of you as a fundamentalist in a compound out in Montana.
I know it's crazy. Even like it's funny when I tell myself like somebody of my friends like, "Oh, what are you?" I was like, "Oh, I'm Muslim." It's like, "Oh, but you don't really pray." It's like, "No, of course I pray." But it's not this is, "Oh, but you don't fast." Yes, I fast, but it's not what you think. It's doing these things doesn't make you a bad person, makes you a good person. But what you see, like exactly like you said, your mind going somewhere because that's where your mind wants to go based on the media because it doesn't show you all the other stuff. And no matter, and some people is like, oh, well, we don't see a lot of peaceful people coming out and talking. I was like, yes, because nobody's gonna watch them. It's boring. So the TV is not gonna show it. They want to see somebody's like, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that. But the world we live in now, and especially in the Middle East, you see the Gaza war, the October stuff, like all these, and it's been happening for years and years and years. It's like, what's going on, and why is the Middle East always like that? Is it because it's based where all the religions are, so that's extremers that we were talking about? Is it because of policies? Is it because of money? Like, what do you think it is? Because when you meet like let's if we talk specifically about Israel and Palestine, you meet an Israeli regular person or a Palestinian regular person, it's exactly the same person, same values, same thing. So what's going on? And what's your thoughts on Gaza in general, Gaza
Yeah,
war?
the Rabbi and I, the last couple of YouTubes,
Mm,
I think you probably heard the last three or four of them,
yeah,
and they address what you're talking about specifically. My reading, my understanding now is that ideology has gotten intertwined, entangled in nationalism, in politics. And I have Al Jazeera, I have CNN, I have all the different things in my news aggregators. So I'm reading all different things. And I picked up on a series of really good articles, and they all kept demonstrating that ideology is mixed up in the politics. And you just mentioned it. What does the average Palestinian want? A house, a TV, to go to work, to have some tomatoes, some yogurt, to have a family. In Israel, it's the same thing. And once we bring in the ideologies, then that's what's clouded the issue. And things like Iran is the enemy. I'll say it right up front. Iran's the enemy. Iran has said, we want to destroy Israel.
yeah,
That's their goal. This and that's kind of a ridiculous. How can we possibly negotiate and talk when they are thrust? Now they have Hezbollah to stir the pot. So now you've mixed in an ideology. They, the Lebanese people, they want to sit at a cafe. They want to have a coffee. They want to trade with Israel. Israel wants to trade with Lebanon. Everyone wants to have trade. Now you've introduced an ideology, and then you start holding people hostage, or you use banks, or you use hospitals, or you use schools as places to hide weapons and to get out. And then you terrorize the local population into turning the other. And all of a sudden, that's my reading. And every time I see somewhere, we, all the countries, need to agree to separate political ideologies from the people in a healthy relationship. Okay?
yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And a lot of the times the problem is, the politicians, you know, if there is peace, if there's everything is, they're not really gonna have a job, in a way. So a lot of them run from both sides, on, hey, the destruction or they run on fear, either the destruction of Israel from like Iran side or Hamas or of even from Israel government is like, oh, we can't have peace, we can't have two-state solutions, so there is no hope. And I think when there is no hope for either parties, there's gonna be no peace because what's the hope? If you can, like you said, watch TV and stuff like that. And I feel like every time there is a terrorist attack or something, it always happened in the Middle East first. Like even the same thing with Bin Laden. He was a problem for the Middle East before he was a problem for America. And when we try to fight him, people say like, "Oh no, he's a freedom fighter. Let him be." Just listen to all voices. And then he started to be evil is evil. I always say, I see the scenes of the hostages coming out and they like kissing the Hamas guys and hugging and thanking them and like so happy with them and they're like they are great and stuff. And this is an act because they have to live, you know? So I always ask this question, why don't people give the same courtesy to the regular Palestinian people around Hamas? Because they always are scared. They're not cheering, they're scared, just like the Hamas. It's the exact same thing, They're gonna kill them if you don't.
You asked about peace. All the proposals I'm hearing are just terminal peace. It's not going to make peace.
Yeah.
If we look at the Treaty of Versailles that ended the First World War, that set up the Second World War because what it did to Germany. But if we look at the Treaty of Paris that ended the Second World War, it led to the Marshall Plan. It led to a strong, independent Germany and Japan, and it was because they got rid of the fanatical element and the local population took over, and with an influx of money and support, not supporting fanatics.
Yeah.
That so we need that same kind of solution in the Middle East. We need the Arab nations with funds to be able to supply both in Gaza and to Palestine that will guarantee Israel's safety and security and the safety and security of the Palestine people. And within that, not a terminal, not just ending the shooting. Ending the shooting is not going to end anything. That's not peace. We really need, and sending the inhabitants of Gaza to Baja California isn't a solution. And creating expensive hotels on the Gaza, that's just showmanship.
That's we'll talk about the Trump deal in a second, but I think most of the solutions was based on two things. One, people don't understand the Middle East, and two, people don't really want peace. Because let's say when there is somebody like Hamas or Taliban or any extremist group, you know, who they funded by, who they, like why they're in power. Why did, the Israeli government allow them to get this money? Why their leaders live in Qatar? Why you going after like for I my thing was from the beginning. The first thing you go to Qatar, get the people out, the leaders, not the people in Gaza, the poor people in Gaza, like, and then do it. But why did you allow Hamas to get like millions from Iran? It's because you want this to keep continuing. But like you're right, if its ideology is not going to change. But now, like, if somebody like lost everybody, how is he going to come and be like, I want peace? It's impossible. So the reason is like just like you said, we need a core solution. Like I think that the regular people want peace, and I think that I absolutely agree with you that the Arabs, I think the Palestinian people need a true leader comes out and be like, "Hey, I am the leader, and there's no way we can deal with Hamas or Hezbollah or stuff like that." And I think the whole world should unite and it's like, let's end the terrorism everywhere. Like if it's Iran a problem or whatever, but also, I think the leaders in Israel should change, Netanyahu and all these
So,
guys.
see, now you brought up, I'm not a Netanyahu fan.
Yeah,
I am not a political Zionist.
yeah,
I'm not a religious Zionist.
yeah.
I'm a social cultural Zionist. And when you look at the present Israeli government, three of the members of the coalition are ultra Orthodox fanatics. They want to annex the West Bank and turn to Israel. They want to throw out all the Arab population. They want to set up Jewish settlements. And to add to it, they don't recognize me as Jewish. These three ultra Orthodox in the Israeli government only recognize ultra Orthodox. According to their view, they don't recognize Reform rabbis in Israel. I
Oh,
can't,
really? I
yeah,
had no idea.
it's fascinating. I can be a rabbi in Saudi Arabia. I can
Mm.
be a rabbi in Iran, in Russia. I can be anywhere in the known universe except in Israel. And I've always been annoyed and upset and aggravated that my own movement didn't push a solution for that from the beginning. They
Why
kept
is that?
because the ultra-Orthodox have always had enough support and votes in
Hmm.
Israel, in the Israel parliament. And so it's British system, parliamentary, and you need a coalition. And so the Orthodox in Israel consider those of us that aren't Orthodox to have been kidnapped by gypsies and brainwashed. And
Wow.
if we would only return, and in fact, three of the members of the cabinet have been pushing for a law to change the law of return. It's not enough just to be Jewish. You have to pass their Orthodox test. Otherwise, you can't become an Israeli citizen. And that wasn't in the Declaration of Israel Independence.
Yeah.
So when you ask the question, one of the problems is in the government of Israel, entrenched in Netanyahu's coalition, are individuals who don't want a Palestine and are pushing for, and that's something else I'm getting aggravated, is allowing Jewish settlements in the territories, even when they weren't supposed to be allowed, and
Yeah.
then looking the other way has to stop. This isn't one-sided. This isn't just a matter of looking at Hamas or Hezbollah or Iran or the Saudis. It's not one-sided. We have to look at Israel and say, what are you doing to help us set the stage? Turning the West Bank into Swiss cheese isn't going to allow for Palestine. And allowing settlers in there, when you say they're not allowed and then a wink and a nod, no, you're setting it up. So Israel has to look at itself and say, for our survival, Israel can't keep this up. The cost of war, the what's happening, you can't be in a constant state of alert for a while, but
Yeah.
it won't last. So it's not good. It would be in Israel's best interest. And Palestine has to recognize the right of Israel to exist as a country.
Yeah.
Okay?
So why do you think this, like, why we in this mess? Like, the obvious, reasons are, that we see, but, the obvious solutions will be like, hey, let's have two states. They both respect each other, Um, they both recognize each other. They're both not a threat to each other. And, do it in a way that's step by step. But why is this not happening? You know?
I think it's the ideologies, is what we mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
that the ultra Orthodox have this vision. This is my land, so
Yeah.
get off my land. Go find your own land because God gave this land to me.
So if you tell us the history, like as a, Israel as a Jewish country, that the whole thing, if you lay us, what is the story?
The Sykes-Picot Agreement,
Hmm.
when the First World War, the prize was the Ottoman Empire, the
Yeah.
Turkish Empire. That was going to be the prize.
Yeah.
How would it be divided up? A Frenchman and a Brit, Sykes and Picot, and the treaties available and the maps are there, got together and they divided it up what would happen at the end of World War One. And then they created a Lebanon. They created a Jordan. Those aren't historic countries. They were part of Greater Syria. They were part of Iran. They were part of other countries. And there were other tribes living there. But that was the British idea of colonialism. And so at the end of World War One, this colonialism took effect and the Middle East was divided up artificially. Okay. And then we got into the Second World War and the Holocaust and Jewish refugees and the idea of having a Jewish homeland. So the UN voted a partition plan. Okay. And the partition plan went through several maps, several different choices. However, ideology crept in, and at midnight, when the UN voted for the state of Israel, some Arab nations invaded thinking they could get a bigger piece of the pie. Rather than saying, oh, good, we're now going to have a Palestine. We're going to have an Israel, and Jerusalem was going to be an international city. It was not going to be the capital of either Israel or Palestine. It was going to be maybe like Rome.
Mm.
Well, no,
The
not so. No, because the
Vatican.
Vatican. Yeah,
Yeah.
but the Vatican's own. But you know what I mean? An
Yeah.
international. Yeah, that's what the UN said.
Mm.
But enough ideology crept in, enough greed crept in, so that uh, enough of the Arab countries said, "Oh no, we can get a little bit more. Let's invade Israel." And it didn't. They were defeated. So now Israel has a little more land. And I think as we look at this ideology creep, we see how we got to where we are now. And then on the Israeli side is this old idea of, oh, we can now own all the way across, rather than saying, this is enough. And I, I'm out there, my podcasts and the Rabbi and I YouTube. I keep saying, not all the time, but doing episodes, that it has to come to be to put pressure on our politicians to say, no, we don't want Israel to be larger. We don't want to annex this territory. It's fine. And look at the agreement between Israel and Jordan, between Israel and Egypt. There
Yeah.
was trade, there was lots of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was another country like Canada, Mexico, and the United States prior to the politics? Again, this is a good example of the ideology creeping in. We have good relationships with Canada and Mexico, but we're watching an ideology creep in and want to do tariffs and no, there's not. We don't have a problem with Canada and Mexico. The three of us have been working together great.
Yeah.
And so this is a really real life example of what something good getting ruined by, and I'm hoping that once the Wall Street Journal and other businesses realize this tariffs aren't a good idea,
Yeah.
and declaring war on Mexico and Canada is just not good for business. It'll just fade away. But we can watch this creep, and that's what I think is going on. Israel, and then there's just the anger involved in these outrageous, the kidnappings, the rapes, the strangling of children, uh, and all that. It's all visceral. And that just ratchets everything up and becomes harder and harder to get us all to tone down and say, for the good next year,
Yeah.
if we all get together, we can do this. You know, Quebecois, there was a great movement that Quebec was going to be an independent country from the Dominion of Canada.
Mm.
Quebecois. Well, they got together and it was decided that the province of Quebec would have some slightly different rules about culture, about language. Quebecois is gone. Don't hear anything about it because the Canadians themselves realized it would be in their best interest if they kept it as one Dominion.
Yeah.
And but it was that happened. But there was a lot of talk of Quebec seceding, even to the point of having the movement.
Yeah.
And so we need to do the podcasts, we need to do the YouTubes, and there are others out there because I didn't invent this. I always tell people nothing is my idea. I pick it up from reading articles and listening to podcasts and things. So I don't want to take credit for anything you see on my YouTube channel. I don't want to take credit for anything you hear on my podcast, but I do take credit for everything I wrote in my book.
In your book. Yes.
Okay, that's definitely me.
Yeah. So do you why do you think the amount of like when we see the attacks that happened October 7th and then followed that by all the attacks on Gaza and the thousands of people died and when you see humanity get to that level and I'm not trying to be naive or anything but when you see humanity got when it's okay for thousands of people to die or for people to be hostage or all this when you see this like what is wrong with us like as a human
Well,
race.
I think Hamas sat down and decided we're going to do the most outrageous thing we can do, knowing it's going to incite the Israelis and they're going to do something more outrageous, and then we're
Yeah.
going to get public opinion on our side. And I think man's inhumanity to man has been around since Cain and Abel
Yeah.
picked up the first rock. I think that we we need to learn inside Judaism teaches what Islam teaches. Inside each of us is the good inclination and the bad inclination. And there's a jihad going on. There's a war inside of us where the, and we're not going to get rid of the good or the bad. The goal of being a human is to keep the balance
Yeah.
and not let them get to the extremes that you end up with the Holocaust or Stalin
Yeah.
or what we see with Hamas or Hezbollah. And it's I the major fun and it's working. If you look at the major number of followers of in Islam, of Judaism, they're good people. You
Yeah.
look at the majority of Christians, they're good people.
Yeah.
So, we're not dealing with huge numbers, but as the expression goes, one bad apple.
Yeah. But that's the thing is like I think like they both when they planned this or when Israel tolerate like I think they both have an agenda. Because even from the Israeli side, I never understood why did Netanyahu decide, or the governor, it's not just Netanyahu, decide to attack right away when you should have get the hostages out first. Like that's the first thing you do, even if you sign a deal. After you get your hostages out, say fuck it. I'm gonna get Hamas, not the people of Palestine, not the thousands of people that
Right.
died. But like this is what I think that happened. The first thing when October 7th happened, which by the way, we say a lot October 7th, but the beginning was not October 7th. It's been
Correct.
known for
Long time
years and
ago.
years and years. But that's the thing is like I feel like there's certain people that's far right on both sides use these things and be like, so as this what Netanyahu or the government was trying to do just was exactly the same thing that Hamas was trying to do. It's like, let's use this to build momentum for our side. Fuck the people and everybody else that we supposed to represent. But, we're gonna build Hamas took millions and billions of dollars, made tunnels, not for the people, but for themselves, you know? And the leaders loved in Qatar, and the same thing in Israel. They attack us. You know what? Oh, don't worry about the hostages. Don't worry about the safety. I'm gonna make a war and take the lands that I want and kill as many people as I can because this is gonna get. And that's what's wrong with what it's crazy. And
Insane.
I can't believe people not seeing it.
Well, I don't remember how long ago Joe and I did a modest proposal, and we did a series on the Rabbi and I that said exactly what you said.
Yeah,
That what are they doing? In fact, we did it just after October 7th. The one I just a modest proposal, just negotiate for the hostages, get them out, then get rid of Hamas.
yeah,
I said exactly what you said. I believe you're right. We're human. We have ulterior motives. We see a chance to get ahead. And we often don't realize that we're violating our own religious beliefs and we're creating a bad situation for everyone. And you see it locally, you see it nationally, you even see it in families
yeah.
that people
But
do.
yeah, the thing is like, what's gonna come out of this? Like let's say 60,000 people died in Palestine. What are these, the relatives of these people, the kids, what they gonna be when they grow up? And same thing in Israel. All the kids that have been in lockdown for like a year and a half and they're attacked even northern, how they gonna feel about the other side growing up? It's not well, I know so many people, obviously because I'm Egyptian, I still know so many people from Palestine that lost somebody. I interviewed Rachel Goldberg, the mother of the hostage, one of the hostages, and it's just like, and she was like, just like you and me. It's like, I feel the same bad for a mother in Palestine or a mother in Israel.
Right.
Get the people out. And it's so sad that she lost her son. You know, it could have come out long time ago. That's the reality is like the people should first of all, Hamas should not have the money to begin with. Netanyahu should not have allowed it. The US should not have allowed it, all this. And the only reason that the Hamas leaders are in Qatar and live there safely is because there's an American base protecting Qatar in Qatar.
Right.
So it's the whole world is like, but if we really want peace, I think peace is not a good business.
Well, besides that, let's go back to addiction. You can't have an intervention. The individual has to reach their bottom, whether it's coke, whether it's marijuana, whether it's spouse abuse, doesn't matter what it is, and you can't set the level. An individual will not go into recovery and recover until they reach their bottom. And I think and believe, I hope this is the bottom for the Middle East. I'm hoping that this has sunk so low that Israel, that the Arab states are going to look at each other and go, no, no more.
Yeah.
Now, I've been surprised working with patients when I thought some of my patients reached bottom. Uh, they came in again, and I said, okay. Unfortunately, for a lot of patients, they die
Yeah.
because the bottom is death.
Yeah.
However, for many of us can reach bottom, whatever our addiction is. And that's what I see in the Middle East. It has to reach bottom for Qatar, for Egypt, for the Saudis. It has to reach the bottom when everyone will look at each other and go, we're done. And like I mentioned, I'm hoping that this will be it. Otherwise, we're just going to have some more of this
Yeah.
until we hit the bottom.
Well,
Yeah,
sadly, I hope we did, but I don't think we did because the reason I'm saying that sadly is because when you look at Netanyahu or the government of Israel, they declaring this as victory that we killed all these people. When you look at
yeah,
Hamas celebrating when they
right.
get the hostages, like they won. And everybody lost except the people in power. They think because they did what they wanted to do originally, like, uh, either move away from a Palestinian state or make it more impossible to happen or have the people hate Israel again. Like all these things, it's just like the people. So I hope, I would know that we hit rock bottom when uh the leaders change. If there is, and since, Israel elects the leaders, like if they elect somebody that's, hey, I want peace, you know, and well, I think one of the reasons Hamas did this, not only, this, because remember that Saudi and UAE and all this, they were signing, normalization with
That's
Israel.
correct. And they wanted to stop the
Okay.
normalization with
Yeah.
Israel. Yeah. So here we are with political ideology.
Yeah.
Hamas and Hezbollah don't really care about Palestinians. They don't care about the people. They,
Exactly. But
yeah.
that's my point. And Israel and the world know that. So why play to their own agenda? You know, like why not get hostages out and then destroy Hamas one by one or whatever without.
Hey, that's what Joe and I said that on
Yeah.
the Rabbi and I YouTube right after it happened. But I think the answer is you and I have to be elected to the Knesset or to be put on a that I think the answer.
I think once we get elected and we get like a lot of money, you and me is like, oh fuck this. I'm sorry if I use one person. It's
Whiskey
like,
Tango Foxtrot. What was
yeah, it's like, you know what? Let's make money. Let's make war is good. That would be, yeah. But
well,
that
yeah. Well, let me bring
unfortunately,
up Vietnam.
yeah,
I was in the PX with one of my patients, and Tony sitting in his wheelchair lost his legs, and we're looking at clothes, and we're picking up different shirts made in Vietnam, and Tony and I are looking at each other. Do we buy this? What do we do? And we said, oh, let's buy it. We like it. And so we start, we're talking about this. Look at how many Vietnamese and Americans died and lost limbs. And now Vietnam is a I've had friends come back telling me what a wonderful time they had in Vietnam and how
yeah,
great the people are. And here, Tony and I are buying clothes. made in Vietnam. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, so maybe there is hope for the Middle East. Maybe, and what happened was Vietnam got rid of everyone from the outside and just became like the Marshall Plan, just
Yeah.
became Vietnamese.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they could negotiate on their own terms.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that we can have something similar because it happened.
Yeah.
Once we got the politicians out and the lies and the stories, and there was no domino theory. Communism wasn't taking over
Yeah.
the world. Once we got rid of the ideologies, the Vietnamese, but look at how many thousands Vietnamese Americans look, and then here Tony and I are in the PX.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, we'll hit rock bottom when people start taking responsibility for the actions for the people they elect, and not fear as much as they try to understand the other one, because especially Jewish, Muslim, and Christians, they're so similar in so many ways. um but let's talk a little, well, my last question on this part is like, what do you think? Do you believe there should be a Palestinian state or no Palestinian state? Should
Oh,
be
no, definitely a Palestinian state.
yeah,
And as I mentioned earlier, part of it goes Israel's right to exist. Israel says Palestinian. You can't have a country, your next door neighbor, whose sole business is to destroy you.
yeah,
That's not a peace. It's not going to work. And look, Jordan doesn't want to destroy Israel. Egypt doesn't want to destroy Israel. Saudi Arabia doesn't want to destroy Israel. If you look, it doesn't have to be.
yeah.
It can be for the good of everybody. And different. It's a country. They have their own interests, their own products. Commerce. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Commerce.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, I believe that if the people see the future, and that's the thing, is like they're so desperate now that the only way who they're gonna turn to, like they're getting attacked
Mhm.
from from Israel by thousands, and then they're getting attacked by Hamas at the same time, and then you have one hope is that, okay, there's a new president, and then he says, I'm gonna do the Gaza Trump thing.
Yeah.
And so what hope they gonna get? So they gotta get a hope, and I think the whole world need to like stand up and be like, hey, let's end this the way it should be. All right, let's talk about religion a little bit.
Certainly.
What do you think? What's your thoughts and the difference and similarity between Judaism, Islam, and Christianity?
About 40, 50, 60 years ago, I decided I need a pair of sneakers.
Hmm.
So I went into the store with, I'm going to buy either high tops or low. Well, I walk in and there's a wall about 100 meters long, 40 meters high, and the person helping me say, what do you need? And I said, I want a pair of sneakers. Well, yeah, yeah, but what for? And we're going through this, and I was playing racquetball at the time. He said, "Oh, these are just for racquetball." I said, "Can I walk in them?" "Oh, no, you need walking shoes." And we're going through all these shoes. And then I bought a couple of pair, and I'm thinking and saying, religion is shoes. And we lose sight of the fact the shoe is to protect the foot, depending what you're doing. So if you're living in the equator, very often the indigenous people don't wear shoes at all because of the mold, the mildew, your feet will rot. Now, if you're an Inuit, you can't go around barefoot, so you want to protect your feet. Religion is shoes. It depends upon the culture and the climate as to how it's observed. What's being observed is identical. The goal is to unite with Hashem, with Yahweh, with God, with Allah. The goals are the same. But if your religion grew up in a tropical climate, then your rituals won't work for the Inuit. Neither will your sandals.
Hmm.
Your shoes won't work. So if we think of shoes as rituals and practice, and then we think of the function, it's all the same. The only difference is how I observe it, the foods I eat, and which way I listen. Islam 5 times a day pray. We pray. Judaism is 3 times a day. Avsalachas. What's the difference? Three times or five times? It was because in dealing with the in the Arabian Peninsula, it just fit better. The five times fit better. In Jews living in towards the West, three times work better. That's not a difference.
Yeah.
It's shoes. And I think too often we focus on the shoes and forget that the goal is a path that's going to get me to. I grew up in New England. We had two seasons, winter and August 29th. The Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat, the festival of trees, just passed. You're supposed to plant a tree. Well, you would have had to use dynamite in order to plant a tree where I grew up. It was just stupid. And as a kid, I never understood. We had little flower pots. We were trying to duplicate the climate of Israel.
Yeah.
Back to the shoes again. That's stupid. The
Yeah.
goal is to respect the environment. The goal isn't about planting. And I think that lies the key. We have to keep reminding ourselves that rituals are reminders of what's important. Then, when you look, the differences are not even differences. It's how do I feel a part of the universe? And even the word God, higher power, we have different terms.
Yeah.
Just recognizing how do I recognize something else? How do I recognize I'm not the sum total of the universe? How do I recognize something about myself? And if I'm going to wear the Inuit shoes while I'm on the equator, I'm going to have very sore feet. And in the same way, if I convince the Inuit to go around barefoot, it won't take long for them to be sorry. So let's stop with the shoes and say, if the shoe fits, wear it. But let's look at and say, what keeps you on the path? Oh, now this is also fascinating. The Hebrew word, our word for Jewish law is not law. It's halakha. It means the way.
Oh, okay.
In Islam, you follow the way.
Yeah.
The Buddha taught the Eightfold Path.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Jesuit training in spirit, it's always the path of the way. And so what we want to look at is, do the elements of the path of the way get me? And I'll wear whatever shoes are comfortable, but let's stop focusing on the shoes
Yeah.
and focus on this and enjoy each other's beliefs. Uh, the biggest compliment I received in my career as a chaplain and this happened about once a month, once every other month for 40 years. I'd have one of my Christian veterans say to me, I want to thank you, Rabbi. I never would have believed a rabbi could have brought me back to the Christ.
Yeah.
I don't accept Jesus as the Christ,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I can't help someone with their spiritual journey because I'm helping them on their way. And you can also appreciate this. I've had many, they were called jailhouse Muslims, and they would, they had enough of an introduction, they would come and they would talk to me about becoming Muslim. They wanted to do more because they recognized what they had been trained in wasn't. And and so I downloaded several PowerPoints on prayer because prayer in Islam is choreographed.
Hmm.
In Judaism, we just kind of bounce around, we shuckle. It's not quite, but there's steps you
Yeah.
take. And so I would, in my office or in the chapel, would put on the PowerPoint and we'd do it together. And then at some point, one of my patients brought me a prayer rug. He said, I have one, you need one. Um, I had no problem doing this and sharing the experience.
Yeah.
It didn't interfere with my beliefs, and it helped these individuals. And then once we did it, they could then move on
Yeah.
in their quest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those
Absolutely.
were the highest compliments.
I was in a hospital one time and there was a priest walking by, goes to talk to patients and stuff. And he asked me, yeah, do you want to, I was like, well, I'm Muslim. He was like, well, we can talk. I was like, sure. And we talked and we had a great conversation and it was healing and it was comfortable, and stuff like that. So, um, so when you see, I feel like, when things are tough, when the world get tough, people go either way. Either they become religious or they become non-believers, And I think a lot of people, like, especially that become non-believers, they will say, or don't believe in God at all. They will be like, oh, well, religions are old school. There's a lot of things that it doesn't cope with the technology, with the way we live and stuff like that. So the the people that convert to whatever religion they are, I always say, like, you have to do your own research because most of us or all of us are born. If I was born in here, I'll be like, if I was born in like some
New
Christian,
York. If
I'll
you're
be
born in
Christian.
New York, you'd probably be Jewish.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. If I was born in New York, I'll be Jewish. If I born, so. But people, it takes 2 seconds. You're born, they give you your religion, and you spend the rest of your life fighting for it. And you haven't even choose it. So I tell all people you should research and see what's best for you, what's fit for you. So people either become like that or become as like, oh, it's too old school and stuff like that. So there's some issues that people talk about religion that they think it's not right. So let's discuss a little bit quickly some of those issues. Like, for example, like abortion, gay rights, trans, all this. Let's
Many,
go.
many things that are issues
Yeah.
don't belong in the ideology or in the voting booth.
Hmm.
If you don't, if you don't agree with marrying another man or two women marrying, don't marry a man. If you don't believe in abortion, don't have one. It's a medical procedure and it has a very narrow use to save the mother's emotional, spiritual, physical life. And so if if you don't want one, don't do you like grilled peanut butter and marshmallow fluff sandwiches? You
Yeah.
don't, do you? Then
Yeah.
don't eat them.
Yeah.
So I believe that germane to what we are talking about earlier, politicians and others have dragged things into the public forum that don't belong there. Now, it would be different if my religion said I have to sacrifice babies and eat them.
Yeah.
Then I think society has a responsibility.
Yeah.
However, for a medical procedure, no. And for birth control, you don't believe in birth control, don't practice it.
Yeah.
But don't pass a law that I can't practice. Look, the example I use is, and we can both identify with this, what would happen if you and I get elected and we pass a bill, we forbid the sale of pork in the United States because our religions say it's against our teachings, no more pork in the United States. What would be the outcry?
Yeah.
People would say, "Oh, that's not fair. That's your religion. That's not my religion."
Yeah.
Well, that's what they should be saying about abortion. And that's what they should be saying about gay, about any of those issues is that doesn't belong in the public forum because you're taking a specific religious belief. Just keep asking yourself about eating hog's ass. How fast would it go if we banned it in the United States? And in Canada, man, the Canadians would be up in arms if we banned the import of Canadian bacon. So don't do what doesn't work for you and don't forbid me to practice. And don't bring in when does life begin and this. Don't bring in gray areas and things we don't know to try to reinforce you're enforcing something because I'll then go and bring in pork
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's written there. It says it right in it. So we want to be able to separate and allow individuals within boundaries. And I think we could really use common sense and say that certain practices of certain faith groups are outside the pale and don't belong. And that applies abortion, birth control, women having access to health care. All of this is about power and control. It's not about religion. And if we don't stop it now, we're going to have a big problem and we're going to be sorry, just like about the Middle East.
Yeah, because people look for something to fight over,
Yeah.
and that's why I always say, like, it's when somebody is like, oh, are you gonna make me do this? It's not about making it. Whatever the teachers of any religion, it's personal between you and God. If somebody get to a point where they tell you you cannot do this, or you have to do that, then that you know that they went to the radical part, because do whatever you want, and at the end of the day, this is a relationship between you and God. But you're exactly right. On the opposite side, don't say don't do that to like don't pray or don't do this or that's stupid. That's it's very personal. But do you believe that religion is under fire for the
No,
last few
no,
years?
again, I think this is just a way to get attention.
Yeah,
And I think this is a way to insert an ideology into something and rally up people to vote for me.
yeah,
Christianity isn't under fire, religion isn't under fire. I I think where the media is the media. And the job is to sell a product, to advertise. And you know the old saying, you're not going to sell a newspaper if you have an article about a dog biting a person. But if
yeah,
a person bites the dog, I have a story.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so we we have to look at each other and recognize the media for what it is and just not go for it, fall for it. Say, yeah, a lot of good people in our country, a lot of good people in the world, and it's time for us to stand up and to start not to anyone, even to ourselves, and say, that's just the media. They're trying to get my attention. There's no war on Christmas.
yeah,
There never was a war on Christmas. Come on.
yeah, yeah. Uh, one of the when I watch a video, and this is back to my point when I say like, yeah, people are born certain way, but they should try to research and read everything, other religions, other stuff. I was surprised, and and I really appreciate how much you know about Islam, which is not a lot of people try to do that. Like a lot of people will be like, when you talk about Islam, they will be like I hear you citing specific surahs and verses and stuff like that. Same thing with the Bible. And I see a lot of people don't do that. Like a lot of people tell me like, oh, where's the 75 verse? I was like, well, can you give me the quote that says that? Have you read the Quran? Like, no. Have you read Hadith? No. So what are you talking about?
Thank you for bringing that up. I got all that from reading. I
Yeah.
got that from following the editorials in the Arab newspapers and then tracing things and looking around and Isaac and Ishmael were brothers.
Yeah.
So, given that they're brothers, I want to learn or know. So, I read an article. And another thing from those quotes from the Quran, many of them came from my Wednesday night live TikTok. And many people threw them at me to try to justify. Well, it says in the Quran that Jews are pigs, and
Yeah.
it says in the Quran that you should kill Jews. Therefore, I'm for those. Actually, people wrote that on my Wednesday Night Live,
Yeah.
so that's where I got them from. So then I said, "Wait a minute, I better see what some Islamic teachers teach." So I took the passages, I Googled them, and then I found articles of some imams and some scholars, and that's where the what you heard came from. These people put in perspective those quotes that were
Yeah.
being thrown at me.
Yeah. That's a great point, because I hear a lot of people always tell me like they want to divide. It's like, well, it's in the Quran, it says that the Jews are they called pigs and monkeys and you have to kill them all. I was like, no, it doesn't. You have to understand what it's so crazy how people try to get, actually in Islam says if you can find mosque, go to a temple or go to a
Right.
church to pray. If you can't find halal food, go to kosher place. That's
Kosher
what
food
it
right there.
says.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but for people to what do you think when people say like, okay, the Quran or Torah or Bible are fiction books? It's not true. It's stories.
Okay. I believe that the Bible, the Torah, is truth and it's not true. Think about that. I
Okay.
believe it's truth and not true. Go back to our sneakers.
Okay.
Abraham, Isaac, Moses, Mohammed, Saul, Jesus, everyone had a religious experience that came to them and was portrayed according to their own understanding. And so we get too involved in trying to prove something's true when we miss the truth.
Mm.
It's irrelevant if there was a burning bush. It's irrelevant if the Red Sea parted. It's irrelevant if Jesus walked on water. He fed the multitudes. What is the truth of those statements? What's the teaching? And we have to get away from finding Noah's Ark and realizing we are on Noah's Ark. It's called the earth. And that's why the Torah is truth and it's not true. And I see that with the teachings of the Buddha. All along the way, we use metaphors, we use examples, and an individual can only have an experience that they can understand. So that's why you want to hear the Jesuit rabbi on the YouTube, because I wasn't walking in the wilderness or I wasn't fishing and a fish didn't talk to me. My becoming a rabbi was the result of my education at a Jesuit college.
Yeah.
And the other wouldn't have worked because if I heard a fish talking, I would have not listened. So when we read some of these things, and then that's what people focus on, and I'm agreeing with you, those are vehicles. So don't get involved in bushes and trees and being on the road to Damascus. What was the truth of that person's experience? And how does it, as you said, relate to the whole religion?
Yeah.
It's, and we're going to find we all share the same truths. There is something out there, whether it's the Tao, whether it's the Force, there's something beyond ourselves.
Yeah.
How do I understand it? And how can I come to appreciate it and stay humble?
And I hope people manage to see it that way, not only in bad times, but most importantly in good times, because a lot of people turn when things are bad to, trying to understand. But I think anything, just be open, try to understand what's going on and read, research, not one source, not, because we live in a world now where it's so funny. I always say that. It's like whatever you believe in, you going to find it online that somebody have the sources that you're gonna if I want to say now that it's healthy to eat monkeys, I'm gonna find
Correct.
professor that says that. But your ignorance is a choice. You cannot just go to one source. You have to go to many sources. You have to research if you want to understand. We're not that different from each other, really, and it's
Well, and just that's what I said earlier when you complimented me on my latest posts. They all came from research. None of them were my ideas.
yeah,
As I read, and I could tell the difference right away between really good scholars in Islam and then people spouting propaganda
yeah.
and stuff. Right. And then I started correlating, and what you heard was an amalgam of, I probably should get a PhD for it. What you heard was an amalgam of my research of your Islamic scholars and what they've done by posting it in their articles online.
And that's the thing is like you didn't stop when you found what you're looking like if you were looking for somebody who spread propaganda, you're gonna find it, but it's not what you were researching. You wanted the truth, not to make your point valid. And that's what a lot of people do with every religion. It's like, oh, look at this. I can't believe they're still doing this. Or this, it's not the point. It's like you said, Uh, Rabbi, I could talk to you for hours. I mean, this is awesome. I would love to have you again soon.
Anytime.
Yeah,
I'm retired, so
yeah.
I have plenty of free time. So
Okay.
as often or as frequently as you would like to have me on, you have my email.
Yes, I
Send me
will.
an email, and
Yeah, I will. I
I'm
will.
glad to talk with you.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
very looking forward. Last thing, what message you want to give to people? And if people want to follow you and find you and watch your show and all that, where should they go?
I always use Rabbi Block, hashtag Rabbi Block, to make it easier. As we've mentioned, the podcasts are called The Rabbi and I.
Hmm.
The YouTube is called The Rabbi and I. If you go to TikTok, it's hashtag Rabbi Block. Go to any of the social media, whether it's an @ sign or whatever the sign is, it's Rabbi Block. And of course, I've mentioned my book, How to Be Jewish in 30 Seconds. The cartoons alone are worth the price.
Okay.
Never mind my wisdom. Joe is a cartoonist. It's really a good book, and it's not just about being Jewish. It's about shoes. It's about getting us away from being scrupulous and finding the truth. And that's what the message I'd like to leave with people. Don't dismiss religion and don't embrace it as magic, because neither one will work. What we want to look for is our path, our way to understand, and just not get bogged down in the mezuzah has to be this height. Oh, that's too high. It doesn't count. Or you have to light the candles this way. Otherwise, it doesn't count. No,
Yeah.
we have to get at how does that get me to unite? What satisfaction do I have? That's the message I want to give. Oh, I have one more thing that's important. I do not believe that God is an old man in the sky dropping space toilets on people he doesn't like.
That's very important. I feel like we should do this regularly and every time. I think I would love to have an episode just to talk about your book as well. But I'll definitely love to have you again soon. Thank you so much, and I'll leave the link to all the YouTube channel and stuff in the description of this episode so people can just click and go see Rabbi. Thank you so much. You're awesome.
Thank you for having me.